When I was first diagnosed with autism as an adult, I felt many different emotions, most of which were really hard to pinpoint and figure out exactly what they were and exactly what that feeling that I felt meant. I think in some ways I felt a lot of relief, like, oh, this explains everything. This is why I am the way that I am. I felt grateful to have an explanation, to have a reason for all these things that just didn't really make sense about me, that didn't really make sense about my life, that didn't really make sense about my place in the world, honestly. I felt I felt a little bit of confusion still, just because it was so new. I didn't know much about autism at the time. I didn't know what it meant for me, what it meant for my life, what it meant for my future, what it meant for understanding and healing from my past. But one thing that I was able to pinpoint and one emotion that I was able to figure out that I felt post autism diagnosis was grief. I felt a lot of grief. And grief is one of those really, honestly, probably one of the most difficult emotions to feel, because with grief, you're feeling all kinds of other emotions also. It's very intense, and it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of feeling, and oftentimes that feeling is really difficult and really challenging. I think I felt grief because I felt sad for my younger self. There have been many times where I picture me as a little boy feeling so out of place, so overwhelmed, so overstimulated, so ashamed of himself. And I just want to go up to him and hug him and tell him everything's okay. It's going to be okay. There's nothing wrong with you. I felt a lot of that. I felt a lot of grief for who I thought I was becoming. Because as it turned out, the person who I thought I was becoming was someone so far off from who I really am. I felt a lot of grief for the understanding that I had of life and the understanding that I had of the world. I think our reality a lot of times is based on our internal experience and our internal reality and our relationship that we have with ourselves. And while I do feel like I had a pretty good relationship with myself, there were a lot of different missing pieces to that. And the autism diagnosis definitely gave me an understanding. However, it changed my entire worldview because it changed my view of myself. It changed my view of my place in the world. It changed my view of how I need to be, how I should be. I felt grief about that. I felt grief about my future. Is my future going to be completely different now? Am I not going to be able to accomplish the things that I wanted to? And a common thing that I see from my comment section and just listening to other late diagnosed autistic people is that grief is a common thing that we feel. when receiving our autism diagnosis. And we don't only feel grief. Like I said, I felt some other emotions as well, but I think the strongest emotion that I felt when receiving the autism diagnosis and the days and weeks and months following the autism diagnosis was grief, just trying to make sense of what it really means for me and how it will affect me going forward, and how it rewrites my story of my past, and how it will reshape my present moment. And after receiving my autism diagnosis, it was pretty challenging. Of course, like I said, I felt a lot of relief, and there were a lot of positive emotions that I felt as well. Emotions that were still really intense, however, just a little bit easier to feel when compared to the more challenging emotions like grief. And in those months after receiving my autism diagnosis, it felt like everything about my life changed. A lot of it for the better. Some of it, I wouldn't say for the worst, but some of it was challenging, a lot of challenging changes. As I began to understand myself better, my relationships changed. As I started to understand myself better, my habits changed, my patterns changed, my routine changed. And as we know, change is really challenging for a lot of us on the autism spectrum. And now that I feel like I'm at a place in my life where I can actually say that there are aspects of myself that I do love, and there are aspects of my autistic experience that I'm learning to love, I can see why all of that had to happen to get me to where I am now and to get me on a path of alignment. I think that if I didn't feel that grief fully, if I didn't experience it, I wouldn't have been able to make those changes in my life. Those changes which I now realize were me finding ways to accommodate myself. They were me trying to understand myself better, a lot of trial and error. And so if you're in that grieving stage, I want you to know that you're not alone in that feeling. I still feel that grief every now and then. It's not a daily thing, and it's definitely not as overpowering as it once was. But just last night, I had a really challenging dream, like about my childhood, and I have these reoccurring dreams every now and then, just about my childhood, where I'm overstimulated in the dream. No one's listening to me. I'm asking for the help that I need. No one's listening to me. And so I do still feel that, and it's still there, and there's still something to work with, which I am working on. And so if you're feeling that right now, or maybe you don't even know what you're feeling after receiving your autism diagnosis, whatever you're feeling, even if you can't pinpoint what it is, because I understand there are a lot of emotions that come with this, a lot of which are really hard to be identified. You're not alone in that. I've experienced it, and like I said, from what I've seen, a lot of other late diagnosed autistic people also have experienced that and are experiencing it. And the other thing I want to say is that there's no rush to heal. There's no rush to move on from that grief. You're experiencing that because this is a really big life change for you. I often describe receiving my autism diagnosis as like an ego death. It completely changed most things about the way I see myself and the way I see the world. And so just take your time with this. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Sometimes we just need to take it one moment at a time. I wouldn't even say to take it one day at a time. Oftentimes when things are really challenging or when we're feeling those really deep, intense emotions, we just have to take it like 1 second at a time. And we have to sort of trust that it's going to play out in a way that it will actually be okay in the end. Like I mentioned, for me, if I didn't experience those things, I don't think I'd be at this place in my life where I've been able to structure a life that supports me and my autism. I don't think I'd be able to understand myself in this way that I didn't know was possible before I experienced all these things. So just take your time with it. Don't rush it. And just take it moment by moment. It's going to be okay. It's probably really hard right now, but it won't be that way forever. A lot of times these difficult moments are not necessarily bad. Just because they're difficult, just because they're challenging doesn't make them bad. Oftentimes they're catalysts for our growth, for us to be even more aligned, for us to find ways to honor our truest self in ways that we don't even realize are possible. So just sit with it, let it flow, let it pass when it passes, let it come when it comes, and just do your best to embrace this pivotal moment in your life, one that I believe will help you find peace with who you are and not just keep trying to survive in life, but ultimately be able to thrive in a life that's meaningful and a life that works exactly for you.